Recently, I watched the 2018 film Bigger. I had been wanting to watch it for a while, so was happy to eventually get around to it. The film is based on the life story of brothers Joe and Ben Weider, with specific focus placed upon the story of Joe, a Canadian bodybuilder and entrepreneur who co-founded the International Federation of Bodybuilders, IFBB, with his brother. Joe created the now widely known Mr. Olympia, Miss Olympia, and Masters Olympia bodybuilding contests. Joe was the typical scrawny youngster with the body composition known as ectomorph. The story of the skinny kid getting picked on by the jock, only to eventually turn the tables, is an age-old tale, but it was forced into the public consciousness through a landmark advertising campaign developed by another early bodybuilding pioneer, Charles Atlas. So it is possible that Joe Weider was in some way influenced by the campaign, or at least the idea it represented. It is suggested in the film that young Joe and Ben are inspired by the character of the charismatic circus strongman, and by early publications of muscular physiques and heroic imagery. Many young boys are initially inspired by athletes and superheroes, but a rare few will so strongly connect with the archetype so as to consciously adopt it into the very fabric of their being. Joe Weider was one of the rare few. Health, fitness, and a powerful mental and physical constitution became something of paramount importance to him, and he began to fully embrace and live life according to that ideal, publishing the first issue of his magazine, Your Physique, in 1940, and building a set of makeshift barbells from car wheels and axles. He would then design numerous training courses throughout the 1950s in the hope of spreading his ideals. The passion he had for his pursuits and the fact that he was a clear embodiment of his worldview made him an attractive man, even if that worldview wasn't yet widely adopted and was merely seen as quaint by the public, given that the idea of maintaining a strong and healthy body without attaching a clear sporting or functional purpose to that body was considered unusual. Especially since most athletes of the era were not necessarily aesthetically appealing and still approached their life, health, and sport in a rather casual manner, not in the way that Joe approached life in a strict, regimented, and determined fashion, which coincidentally is now the way in which all professional athletes live their lives. Joe and Ben Weider were clearly ahead of their time and founded Weider Publications, Weider Fitness, and Weider Nutrition, all primary examples of a fitness magazine publisher, a gym franchise, and the now multi-billion-dollar sports supplement industry. Yet long before the significant success he enjoyed later in life, Joe met the woman who would become his first spouse. Now within the movie, she is initially attracted to his aesthetic, his talents, and passion, but his plans are only just starting out and haven't yet truly blossomed. So eventually she confronts him and tells him that she thinks it is all a pipe dream and she just wants him to give it all up and live a normal life with her. Now those of us who have an understanding of relationship dynamics surely realize that if he were to do as she said and give up his purpose, she would eventually grow to resent him. So a divorce is not only inevitable but necessary, because you should never lose sight of your life task once you find it. Then comes the most profound line of the entire movie, where Joe acts as the reflective narrator and says, "I didn't want to be loved for who I was, I wanted to be loved for who I wanted to become." The reason that line stood out to me so clearly is because it is an incidental direct reference to the Western philosophical and ontological notion of becoming, the notion of constant longing, and the dynamic spirit of relentless pursuit acting as a means to its own end. The foundational notion of becoming stems from the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus. Therefore, this demonstrates just how fundamentally vital and philosophically powerful the ancient idea of becoming actually is. So, following on from his divorce, Joe continues to strive after his goals and crosses paths with a higher value woman, Betty, brought to his attention within the movie by his associate and fellow fitness entrepreneur, Jack LaLanne. Of course, no story of Joe Weider is complete without mentioning the role he played in effectively discovering the legendary Austrian bodybuilder Arnold Schwarzenegger and introducing him to an American audience and thus the world. With the further development of bodybuilding's golden era on the shores of Venice Beach, California, and with the eventual release of the film Pumping Iron in 1977. It is clear in Joe's story that Betty understands him to a greater degree than his previous wife, and can see his vision materializing, as by this stage it is more developed. Betty eventually becomes his second wife, although at one point, even she tries to question his passion and calls him obsessed, wanting him to be more open with her about his childhood, which is depicted as traumatic in the film. She also wants him to be more emotionally present and not just focused on his goals all the time. But when Joe reveals he didn't have a happy childhood and will pursue his vision anyway, regardless of what she thinks, she does a complete 180 and actually admits how much she loves him for never wavering on his purpose. So she really does believe in him and watches as he surpasses his adversary and fitness industry rival Bill Hawke, who is loosely based on the sports promoter Bob Hoffman, and Weider's real-life colleague and eventual rival Dan Lurie. Hawke is also a caricature of some of the uncivilized ethics and conduct that are synonymous with the era within which the film is set. Joe's wife, Betty, was by his side as he reached the metaphorical zenith, and remained with him for the rest of his life until his passing. In many ways, Weider was an example of a generalist, not necessarily in the intellectual sense as a polymath, but in the empire-building entrepreneurial sense of being motivated to succeed and develop his brand in a number of related areas. The generalist still exists today, but is increasingly more uncommon. The generalist may be a talented individual who, rather than be intensely focused on one pursuit, actually feels the sense of dynamic restlessness pulling them in different directions, not for the money and fame, as they are often already successful and well known for their initial pursuit, but for the challenge and for the love of what they want to do, as well as the desire to satisfy that nagging urge to be multidimensional and ideally more fulfilled. Personally, I very much felt a strong connection to the portrayal of Joe Weider and his personality, because if it is not self-evident enough through the passion of my words in this video and many others, I feel the same about my desire to train in the gym, help my audience, and create entertaining, insightful, and meaningful content to help build this channel. That is the vision, that is the goal, and that is what I intend to make happen.